Good evening, everybody. Today we are starting with the chapter on project time management. And as we have studied scope in the previous class, we understand that scope, time, and cost are three project objectives. These are the basic areas which have to be baseline, and all other knowledge areas impact them. And ultimately, once all the three baselines are created along with the management plans of each of the knowledge area, that forms the project management plan. So this is the main ingredient. And not only that, time management has got another importance, and that is it also accepts the impact of cost, quality, and scope on itself. And until and unless your schedule is properly established, I mean, the cost has been baseline, the scope has been baseline, still the schedule will fluctuate. The only when the schedule is also baseline is the time when the project management plan can be declared complete. So this is more sensitive than others from this perspective because it has to take care of all the possibilities, all the uncertainties which could even happen due to risk, uncertainty, or any other knowledge area. So everything will ultimately impact your time, your schedule, and once your schedule is satisfactory and you understand that this is how we are going to do the project, it is final, then only we can baseline it and we can start executing our project management plan. Time management has 7 different processes in it, and these 7 processes, most of them, first 6 of them are belonging to the planning process group. Only one process, 6.7, the last one, is in monitoring and control. That also speaks that time management is an area which has to be thoroughly planned. As I disclose the sensitivity of this management area, you understand it is going to greatly impact your project management plan. The project management plan can never be complete before the schedule is established, the time management plan is complete, and therefore we have to be extra careful in its planning. So you see that we have 6 processes to do that. As in any management plan or in any knowledge area planning, the very first step is to develop a management plan. So 6.1, plan, schedule, management, is responsible for developing that management plan. That is a schedule management plan. Schedule management plan will tell us all the rules, regulations, all the procedures, guidelines or instructions which have to be followed in the planning of schedule. So all the subsequent processes we are going to discuss, they will be briefly defined in the schedule management plan as to how to do them, what principles must be taken care of, and certain guidelines will be provided regarding to those processes. But at the same time, at this stage, we do not know what will be the result of each of those processes. So we just can provide them a broad guideline or outline help how to do their job. But once they will do their job, the specific outputs will then come out of it, which are at this stage not known to us. So we just have a set of guidelines, and this is to be provided to all the subsequent processes to do their job. Next in hierarchy is 6.2, which is defining the activities. All the activities which have to be done in the project will have to be explicitly defined. as if once we know all the activities, only then we will be able to plan them carefully, which would include naturally the sequencing, estimation and everything else. But before that, we must have these activities on the board. How do we get these activities? What have we already done? We have done the scope management planning. And we also have the scope baseline ready with us. And the scope baseline, it included the WBS, the scope statement and the WBS dictionary. So naturally, we will require the scope statement to remain within that scope while we are defining these activities. We will require the WBS because that WBS, the lowest part of the WBS was the work package. Here we are supposed to break that work package down to activities. So we need to have those work packages. So scope baseline is going to be a major input in this process, and we will use the same tool of decomposition we used to create the WBS, and with the use of that tool we will further decompose the work packages into the project activities. Once we have done that, we will come up with a list of all the activities to be included in the project, which is called the activity list. But even before that, we will also have the milestone list. And what is a milestone? A milestone is a point in time when something major happens. It is something important happening in your project. Something which is producing some remarkable result. What is the biggest achievement of a project? What is the biggest achievement of a milestone? Can you tell me please?
Sir, completion of the project.
And what comes out of it?
I'm sorry, sir?
What comes out of completion?
The product.
The product. So once you produce the ultimate end product, that is the biggest achievement, because that speaks by its own self that all the objectives of the project have been met in shape of this product. So that is my biggest milestone. Do we have some interim milestones also within the life of the project? Some major happenings, some major outputs?
Yes, sir. The phases.
Definitely. Every phase has its own output or a product defined, and that is an achievement of that phase. So every phase will end in a milestone. Moreover, even within a phase, there could be a group of activities resulting in something prominent. Some prominent output comes out of it. That point can also be defined as a milestone. So I have to create a list of all the milestones also. In this process, define activities process, I would rather say first you define a list of milestones and then you decide the activity list. It is not enough. We have to describe these activities in a little further detail. We just can't leave it to the list of activities. Every activity has certain particularities, certain characteristics, and certain definition. So I will create some attributes for each activity. Like what is important about the activity, what is the full name of the activity, what is the number of the activity, what is the duration of the activity, what is the dependency of the activity. So all these things are called the activity attributes. I'm not asking you to tell me exactly how long this activity will take. This will be decided later, but you need to have time as an attribute. You need to have dependency as an attribute. So what all the attributes are to be included with the activity, you have to decide them here. So define activities gave us three things, three outputs. One was the milestone list, activity list, and last was the activity attributes. These are the three major outputs coming out of activities. Now once we have defined the activities, we are now equipped. We are now equipped to deal with these activities and plan them further. Sequence activities is the next process in which we will define these activities in another detail, and that is to establish a sequence between these activities. Which activity is to be done first and which activity is to be done later. So to establish that, I have to understand what is the dependency amongst these activities. We have to decide the dependency determination here. So sequence activities will ultimately result in a network of activities, a flow of activities in a diagrammatical manner, which we usually call the network diagram. And to create that network diagram, every activity must have attribute of dependency. This activity is dependent on what activity and for what. Once we know that, we can link those activities in form of the network diagram, and network diagram will clearly show where the activities all the activities have started from a single point, that is the start of the project, and will end at a single point where the project has accomplished its objectives. So that's what we want to achieve. So sequence activities will give us a network diagram. So after we have the sequence established, and remember, by the time we are creating the sequence, we do not know the durations or resources. We have yet not estimated them. So sequencing is a job which can be done even without understanding and without knowing the durations or resources. So network diagram can be created. The flow of activities can be established in a sequence diagram or a network diagram. Next activity would be estimating the activity resources, and then is the estimation of the activity duration. Both of these jobs can be done simultaneously, but it would be wise if we can start with the resource estimation first. But anyways, both of these things will happen almost simultaneously because they impact each other. It is not only these two things, but there is yet another estimate which is called cost estimate. Estimate cost also, happens along or beside them. So all these three things interact with each other and affect each other, and their estimates, synchronize with each other. So when we are talking about estimating the activity resources, that means the activity, each activity will have to be estimated for what all kinds of human and any other kind of resources that activity will have to be using. Similarly, once we have the resources, a clear idea of how many estimates would be there, just, yes please.
Excuse me, sir. The sequences must have been already defined in the scope. And what kind of estimation of activity resources it means when we have to do it in cost?
how do you say that sequence can be defined in scope?
Sir, because look, once we know that what we are going to do, obviously things would be planned accordingly. You know,
No,
like
no, not at all.
one thing would
Just
be done
know,
before the other thing.
in scope, we just know our objective, and we have just created a mechanism or approach how to do this project, and that approach is a generalized approach. I have broken that approach down into some phases which are sequential in nature, but practically speaking, that internal details, which activities are to be done when, has yet not been decided in scope. Scope gave you a very high level picture of the division of the whole project into phases. That's it. It does not understand which activities will be there and in what sequence those activities will be done, because within a phase or within a work package, how the activities will actually materialize will have to be established in this process, sequence activities. So for the whole project, the level of activity has yet not been defined. In scope, we did only go down to the level of work package, and work package was construct a wall. Now, constructing a wall will include a number of activities. You know, you have to procure the bricks, you have to procure the material and all that, and then you have to hire the people and you put them on the job, and they will do the brick laying, and then they will do the plastering, and then they'll do the, you know, painting and all that. You know, a lot of work is to be done. A lot many activities have to be done. What is the sequence those activities are going to happen? This we don't know.
Okay, okay, sir, got it. Thank you.
Right. But I was rather expecting another question from you, and that was, how can we develop a network diagram without a duration? Did that not come to your mind?
Sir, I was stuck on this
Okay.
before.
Okay, I'll explain that later, but for the time being, you must hold on to that we have to have a sequence established. And when we are establishing the sequence, the resource and duration estimates do not matter. Okay. Now, talking about the resources, I said that for each activity, you will have to determine what kind of resources are required, whether they are human resources or other kind of resources. They could be machines, they could be tools, they could be equipment, they could be raw material. So what all resources do you require to do this specific activity? You have to outline that. This is estimation of the activity resources. But you see, later on, when we have the restrictions of the duration and cost and other things, the resource requirement may have to change. It might be possible that comfortably we thought that 4 masons would be required to construct this wall, but later on we learn that we do not have 3 masons available, 4 masons available, and we have only 3 available. So the ultimate uh, allocation of resources might be different from this estimate, but we have to start from somewhere. So therefore, we will do a resource estimation. Then we will do the duration estimation. How much time each activity will take. That is also dependent on the resources, because with lesser resources, we may take longer time. With more resources, we may take less time, but then it is also very complex. But whatever resources we have contemplated so far, we will assign durations according to that. And once that is done, all the data we required is now available. We have the activity list, milestone list, and the activity attributes. We have the sequence of the activities. We have the resources. We have the durations. This is all the data of the project. Now all this data will get into the next process, 6.6, develop schedule, and here is the time when we will put it all together. So this is the first time when duration is known, resources is known, activities are known, their sequence is known. Now we will try to put them together. We will again take up the network diagram we have created in the sequence activities process, and we will load that with durations, and only after we have done that, we are in a position to determine how much time this project will take. Trust me, there is no possibility of determining exact time of the project is about to take without doing this process. In develop schedule, for the very first time, you would know how much time the project will take. I have seen people, they say we have all the data, this is no problem, we know how much the project will take. I say, okay, find out. If you have got activities, you have got durations, how can you find out the duration of the project? They simply add up the duration of all the activities and tell me this is the duration of the project, which is absolutely wrong. There are many activities which are going to happen in parallel, and we have to take into account the sequencing in which the activities are actually happening, and there could be a lot of parallel streams of work happening, and therefore it is not simply adding all the activities duration together to find the total project duration, but actually we have to put it on the network diagram, and that network diagram has to be calculated, and only then we will be able to find how much time do you require to complete this project. Do you get my point?
Yes, sir. Sure.
And Asad, are you also with me? Asad, you can type if you can't speak. Okay, still catching up. Fine. Right. And Rijo has to do a lot of catching up because he has missed a lot. But anyways, I hope the recorded lectures may help you. Anyways, in develop schedule, as I said, the very first thing is to put them all together into a network diagram which is already created, and then we calculate forward, and once we calculate forward, we will find exactly how much the project will take, and then I'll explain all of this later also, because I am just trying to summarize the things here. And then you do a backward pass. You calculate from the duration of the project you have found, taking it as the last date of the project, you calculate everything backwards. That is called the latest, calculating the latest activity, start and finish dates for every activity. Now, once you have got the latest and earliest dates, it will be very easy to find the difference between the two, which would show you which are the activities which have some kind of float, meaning that if they are delayed by this much time, it will not impact the overall duration of the project. And there will be a path in this network diagram which will have no float at all, and that would be called the critical path, because none of the activities on the critical path can be delayed any further. So we will find the critical path in develop schedule. Many people think that all this job which I have just told you is done in sequence activities. Remember, sequence activities have absolutely nothing to do with the duration. The durations are calculated later, and they are then put together in develop schedule, and ultimately you develop your network diagram duly populated by the durations. Once you have found your critical path, once you have done all the calculations on this network diagram, that is where you are now able to translate this network diagram into a Gantt chart. I hope you all understand what is a Gantt chart or a bar chart. This is a horizontal, these are the horizontal lines on time scale for each activity, showing the start and the finish of that activity. So these bars indicate the start date and the finish date of each activity, and the whole project is shown on one chart. So this is where we can develop the Gantt chart or the bar chart, because network diagram does have all the start and finish dates for every activity. Therefore, it is just a matter of translating it into a bar chart. That's it. So once you have the Gantt chart, then the story doesn't really finish there. because this Gantt chart is very, highly adaptable. Anything happening to the project, anything we can think of happening with each and every activity could impact this Gantt chart. If an activity is delayed by one day, everything in the project, in the Gantt chart, would be moved forward, maybe if it is critical. Or maybe, if it is not critical, then probably that activity will have flowed, but its start and finish date will slightly change. But whatever happens, the schedule is going to be impacted. There might be some risks due to which this schedule is disturbed. There might be some procurements due to which the schedule is disturbed. Any knowledge area can cause some impact on this schedule, and therefore we will keep adjusting this schedule until and unless we are sure no more changes are expected, and only then we will baseline this schedule in this process. Developed schedule is the last planning process in time management, and therefore because it is last process, the schedule has to be baselined here. That is the final version of schedule we want to implement or execute. This is what the baseline is. Now in control schedule, like we did in the scope control, here also we will actually be looking at the work performance data received from execution, the project management plan or the schedule we have got, comparing them, whether the dates are right or wrong, they are delayed or early, finding the variance, establishing a trend of those variances, and creating the projections for future. This whole analysis will give us a forecast when the project is now likely to complete. And if this delay is affecting the three baselines, the scope, time and cost, any one of them, then a change request will be moved to adjust that in the schedule, to correct the schedule, to ensure that project is brought back on track. This process of moving the change request, analyzing the data, and making amendments to the project management plan and project documents all happens in control schedule process. So this was a brief summary of all the 7 processes. Now let's talk more about the time management. Time management includes those processes, as you have seen the 7 processes, required to accomplish timely completion of the project. This is a systematic way of doing the job in time. If you don't follow these processes, then probably you will not be able to, in most of the cases, you will not be able to meet your targets. As I have explained already, schedule management plan or the plan schedule management process establishes the policies, the procedures, documentation for planning, developing, managing, executing and controlling throughout the project schedule, how it is to be handled. In all the processes, all the subsequent processes, this mechanism, this guideline is to be provided by schedule management plan, and the output of this process is the schedule management plan. Then is define activities. As I said before, this is the process of identifying and documenting the specific actions to be performed to produce the project deliverable. What all are the activities which are actually to be done to deliver the project's deliverable or the product. So this will give us what? This will give us activity list, activity attributes, and also the milestone list. In sequence activities, what are we going to do? We do know what the activities are. Now we have to find how these activities are related. What is to be done first and what is to be done later? What can be done after what? So this dependency has to be determined between various activities, and taking care of those dependencies and catering those dependencies, we will establish a sequence in which the activities will happen, and that would result into a network diagram, a schedule network diagram. And as I said earlier, this schedule network diagram will not have any resources or durations shown into it. It just shows the dependency and the activity. Now, once we are estimating the activity resources, this is the process of estimating the type and quantities of material, human resources, equipment, or supplies required to perform each activity. So for each and every activity, we have to calculate. This is not a lump sum calculation that you just order on your whims, uh, 5,000 bricks to be ordered. You have to exactly calculate for each and every activity what material and in what quantities and what type of material is required for each and every activity, and then you have to sum it all up bottom up fashion to find out what is your total requirement which you can order. And also you must know that when that order is to be delivered, you can't deliver the whole thing before the project and then keep paying for the storage of that equipment or maintenance of that equipment. So you would like to have these items or resources available to you just in time to use them. So do not order everything beforehand. You may require certain items towards the end of the project and certain items in the beginning of the project. So when and where any item is required, giving it a due margin of transportation and delivery, you can order it beforehand by that margin, but not very early. Once we have the resources calculated, which I said may change also, we also start estimating the duration of the activities. This process of estimating the number of work periods, how much time is required, needed to complete an individual activity with estimated resources. So whatever were the resources we estimated, in accordance with those resources, how much time it will take, this we are going to calculate. And due to this, we will ultimately be able to find out the duration of the project, but not just by summing up the duration of all the activities, because that would be wrong. That would assume that everything is happening in sequence, which is not. There are a lot many things which will be happening in parallel. In developed schedule process, we put all this data together. This is a process of analyzing the activity sequences, durations, resource requirements, and the schedule constraints. Because schedule constraints are going to impact us and we may be forced to change the duration of resources or something. And ultimately, we create a project schedule model. The first shape the Gantt chart will take is called the project schedule model. Later on, we will keep changing it, we'll keep, causing the impact of other things on it, and ultimately this will keep changing shape. And every changing shape of this schedule model would be called a schedule instance. And the very last shape which we all agree on that this is the final shape and this is how the project should be done is called the schedule baseline. So I introduced you to project schedule model, project schedule instances, and the project schedule baseline. Anyways, these all things are going to be discussed ultimately. This concludes our planning portion of time management, and therefore we must establish a schedule baseline here, and that schedule baseline I just described is the final version of the schedule, which is approved by your sponsor, and ultimately this is what we are going to execute. Now, as far as the execution is concerned, we understand we have no process of time management there because integration has taken up the responsibility through the project management plan to execute it unifiedly. So scope, time and cost will not have any process in execution, but integration will take care of them. In control, monitoring and control, we have a control schedule process. This is the process of monitoring the status of the project estimates to update the project progress and manage changes to the schedule baseline to achieve the plan. So, thorough analysis, estimations, projections, and ultimately the forecast all of this is calculated due to the work performance data we were receiving from execution. Comparing it with the project management plan, we have done this analysis, and ultimately if there was something wrong in the baselines, we have to fix something in the project, then we move a change request which when approved will be implemented, and the project management plan and project documents will be accordingly updated. So these were the 6 processes. So far, are you okay with it? Right. Now let me give you some concept about the schedule data, and the schedule model. Okay, let's look at it in this way. Distinguishing the project schedule presentation from schedule data and calculations that produce project schedule is practiced by referring to the scheduling tool populated with the project data as the schedule model. Now this is a very difficult sentence. It encompasses so many things one cannot follow at all. But I'll take you one step at a time. Let us move back. What we created in the very beginning, we created a schedule management plan. And schedule management plan included all the procedures, all the guidelines, all the methods, all the tools, all the methodologies. So all the tools which were to be used were defined there. The software you are supposed to be using, the methodology you are supposed to be using, all that was defined also in the schedule management plan. Now, using that methodology and the scheduling tools decided in the schedule management plan, you will create the data of the project. That is called the project data or the schedule data. This data is created by what processes? The previous 4 processes, the 4 processes. When we defined the activities, the activity data was made available. When we defined the network diagram, the sequencing data was made available. When we defined the resource estimates, the resource data was made available. And when we decided the duration estimate, the duration data was also made available. All this was the scheduled data, but that was yet not put together into the sequence. Therefore, this scheduled data once put into the schedule, that creates a form, and that form when translated into a Gantt chart will give you a shape of a schedule model. The very first shape it emerges into is called a schedule model. But as I said, this schedule model is highly volatile. Anything changes. You change an assumption, the schedule will change. You change, you impose the effect of a risk, it will change. Anything in any knowledge area, if changes, may impact this schedule, and this is highly volatile and always moving around. One day you find it to be 40 days long project, other day you find it is 44 days long project. Things are changing in it. So you will let it simmer, you will let it stabilize, and once you are fully satisfied that all the impacts which had to be imposed on the schedule have now taken their effect and there is no more change, then you decide to freeze this schedule to be executed. You baseline this schedule. Now, from developing the first schedule model till developing the schedule baseline, all the variations of schedule you had been going through are called schedule instances. Schedule instances. But none of the instance was final. The final is the schedule baseline. But all the instances are important to us. We have to keep track of all those instances, and we can't simply ignore them. So to keep a record of all those instances, they all have to be saved somewhere, archived somewhere. They may not be just few instances. They may be hundreds or thousands or millions of instances. I will discuss that, how you can create millions of instances of a schedule during a project. So all these instances are to be secured somewhere because they may have to be referred back at a later date. A schedule model is a representation of the plan, the whole plan, for executing the project activities, including durations, their dependencies, and other planning information used to produce this project schedules along with other scheduling artifacts. And you see, PMBOK does not talk much about this. I mean, that does talk all sense, but at the same time, further details are also available in another standard of PMI, and that is called Practice Standard for Scheduling. I don't, explicitly recommend that you must go through that, but as far as PMP is concerned, PMBOK is enough. And if you understand the whole this thing, then this is okay with me and with PMI. But if you really want to build your knowledge and understand how, what are the minute details of scheduling and what you should practically consider when you're doing scheduling, then you must go through the practice standard for scheduling as well. By the way, there is another certification by PMI by the name of PMI-SP, that is Scheduling Professional. Scheduling Professional is a certification which is explicitly addressing the practice standard for scheduling, but it is not only a certification of scheduling, it is a whole PMP in itself. You may consider yourself a complete PMP if you have cleared the SP exam, because this is a specialization and this tests your knowledge of whole PMP plus specialization of scheduling. But if you are a PMP, then you are not a specialist in scheduling. You are just a PMP. But a scheduler is a PMP also, whether he has done PMP or not, but his knowledge is considered equivalent to PMP plus a specialization in scheduling. Similarly, PMI has yet another certification on risk management, and it is based on practice standard for risk management, and that is also the same story. It is PMP by itself with a specialization in risk. But anyways, right now we are just discussing the scheduling, so let me move ahead with that. On some projects, especially those of smaller scope, defining activities, sequencing activities, estimating activity resources, estimating activity duration, and developing the project schedule model are so tightly linked that they are viewed as a single process that can be performed by a single person over a relatively short period of time. What does that mean? That means although we have defined these processes as separate processes and they have got separate objectives, separate tools, separate methods, but generally speaking, there is usually a single person in an organization for smaller projects who does all of these jobs because they are associated with each other. They can be done by a single person. So they generally treat all of this as a single process, which is explicitly not really very right because, as I said, each one of these processes is different from other and may have to use different tools and techniques. So a single person who is managing them all, does he have the knowledge and expertise of all of these things? If so, then yes, of course he can do it. And probably he should be a specialist in scheduling also, and I would prefer a PMI-SP to be doing this job for me. These processes are presented here as distinct elements because the tools and techniques for each process are different. But for larger projects, larger scope projects, you might have to have separate people or even separate teams on working on maybe each and every process out of these. So this depends on the volume of your project, the size and complexity of your project. Therefore, I don't make it a rule that you must have a separate person assigned for every activity, for every process, or a single person can do it. This is the decision which is yours, and you have to see how sensitive schedule is to you, how big your project is, and ultimately based on that, you will decide who will do it. Generally, in small project manager himself does it, all by himself, all of these processes. So overall, these all these responsibilities, like other responsibilities of the project management, fall in the domain of project manager, and it is his decision how he gets this done. Okay, as far as the schedule management plan is concerned, as we said, that schedule management plan is going to encompass all the tools and techniques and procedures and all the methods and guidelines, everything he will tell. But the schedule management plan does not know what are the names of the activities. It does not know which activity depends on what activity. It doesn't know nothing about that. These jobs are to be done after the schedule management plan is developed. But the guideline, the method, the tools, the methodology, all these things will be provided by schedule management plan. The project time management processes and their associated tools and techniques are documented in schedule management plan. The schedule management plan is a subsidiary plan of the project management plan. The schedule management plan identifies a method, scheduling method, a scheduling tool, sets of formats, various formats in which the job is to be done, and establish criteria for developing and controlling the project schedule. So all the processes after plans schedule are defined in the schedule management plan. The selected scheduling method, whatever it is, it would define the framework and algorithms used in the scheduling tools. And why are they being used? As if the schedule data is populated into that, and that creates a schedule model. And that model, as I said, would change over time till we freeze it, till we baseline it, and all the changed shapes are called the schedule instances. And one other term I must introduce here, and we have read it in 2 slides back, schedule presentation. Schedule presentation is how a schedule can be presented to various stakeholders. Someone would like to see a Gantt chart, another person would like just to see the list of activities in a sequence. Another person may like to see it in a pie chart shape or something like that. So it all depends how some stakeholders wants it to be presented. Any instance of the schedule could be presented. So this schedule presentations apply to the schedule model, the first creation. It applies to all the instances of the schedule, and it also applies to the schedule baseline. Some of the better known scheduling methods could be the critical path method, the critical chain method. We'll talk more about these in subsequent discussion. Schedule development. It uses the outputs of all the processes like define activities, sequence activities, estimate resources and duration. So all the project data or the schedule data is combined in the process of development of the schedule. And how do you do that? You use the scheduling tools to join it all together. And it produced ultimately the Gantt chart, which is the first Gantt chart, is my schedule model. Just assume that this first schedule model is a balloon in which some project data has been aired, has been filled into it. So this balloon has inflated. It has taken a shape. But what if an activity changes, some air changes within the balloon, the shape of the balloon will change and it will become another instance, schedule instance. Ultimately, you say, okay, now this is the final shape. That final shape of the balloon would be the schedule baseline. So the finalized and approved schedule is the baseline that will be used to control the schedule. In control schedule process, we will be only referring to the baseline. We will not be talking about the other, instances are the original schedule model, but for analysis purposes, we can use them. We can refer to them. But for the direct analysis, how well the job has been done, it is okay or not, this is to compare the work performance data with the baseline. As the project activities are being performed, the majority of effort in the project time management knowledge area will occur in the control schedule. You see, when the project is being performed, it is in execution. Monitoring and control is working in parallel. And all the responsibility now is on the shoulders of control schedule to fix the things, to bring the project back on track, and to ensure completion of project work in a timely manner. I'll show you a diagram that gives a scheduling overview that shows how the scheduling method, tools, outputs from the project time management processes interact and create a project schedule. This is the diagram. Before that, let's have a look at the broad shape of all the 7 time management processes. This is the overview of time management. It shows all the 7 processes we just studied. Plan, schedule, management, and its inputs, tools and techniques and outputs all are shown here. Similarly, for every process, define activities, sequence activities and all that, every process is defined here with its inputs, tools and techniques and outputs, which we will be subsequently discussing one by one. But this is how it all looks like. This is a summary page of all that. This is a diagram I was referring you to. If you can see that there are 2 big circles intersecting. Now, what are these 2 big circles? One big circle, the scheduling method. The scheduling method was the basic mechanism by which the schedule is to be created. What method are you going to use in your project? Is it the critical path method or a critical chain method or whatever kind of method you want to use? That would be selected in schedule management plan and that would be followed. Remaining within that method, you may select certain tools, scheduling tools, which are also defined in schedule management plan. So you have been advised to use a specific scheduling method through specific scheduling tools. This information was given to you by schedule management plan. Now you are creating the project data or the project information, which is the activity list and sequence and duration and resource estimation and all that. All this data, when put into a shape through the use of the scheduling method and tools, it forms the first shape of schedule, which is called schedule model. This is the first Gantt chart. Now this Gantt chart keeps going through certain number of revisions and every revision is a schedule instance and you could present any one of those to stakeholders at any moment. Wherever you are, if some stakeholder is to be shown where our schedule stands, you can present that version or that instance. But ultimately, the finalized version, the approved version of this is the project schedule baseline, which will ultimately be created. Now, the project schedule model or instances or the baseline could be presented in a number of ways. Some of the examples have been shown here. For example, you could show only the list of the activities with their durations written in front of them. You could show the whole Gantt chart to the stakeholder, or you can just show the network diagram to the stakeholder. Whatever are his requirement, you can show it according to that, and that is called the schedule presentation. Whatever format you present your schedule is the schedule presentation. Right. Are we okay till now? Okay, we are fine. We can move on with the with a detailed description of each and one of these 7 processes. And the first one is plan schedule management. And as we have already discussed and defined that this is the place where all the policies, procedures, documentation, planning for all the process groups, planning, development, managing, executing, controlling, all that is done here in the schedule, plan schedule management. And the key benefit of this process is that it provides you the guidance and direction on how the project schedule will be managed throughout the project. So the complete mechanism is encapsulated in the schedule management plan. Schedule management plan is a component of the project management plan. Uh, Depending upon the type of the project, it could be formal or informal. It could be highly detailed or broadly framed. It all depends upon the needs of the specific project and includes appropriate control thresholds. Now, what do you understand by a control threshold? Any ideas?
Sir, limit of defining the limit of something like
Right,
control.
right, very right. Actually, control threshold is that in your schedule, how much delay or early happening of an activity is acceptable to you. If your project is in months, then minutes do not matter. Maybe hours also. So what is your control threshold? Still, if the project is very sensitive, very complex, maybe minutes do matter even in a months long project. But it all depends upon what is your control threshold. And depending upon the control threshold, your project will be, planned in as much detail. If the controls are too much, if you need to monitor each and everything in the project schedule, then probably you have to have a formal, highly detailed plan. It also defines how schedule contingencies will be reported and assessed. How would you make allowance for the delays and all that. Updated to reflect a change in the way the schedule is managed. That means that schedule management plan, though, is the main document which provides guidelines to all the subsequent processes, but still it can also be amended, maybe due to the performance of those activities, those processes which come later. But if we realize that schedule management plan did not describe a certain detail and that should have been described, that could be added at any time through a change request into the schedule management plan also. It is a major input into the project management plan, because once the schedule management plan and the schedule baseline enters the project management plan is finally complete. In this process, what all are the inputs? Not very difficult, easy to understand. We need to have the project management plan. Obviously, we need to have the project management plan, because project management plan, in whatever form it is, it does provide us the guideline for how to develop the schedule management plan. As schedule management plan is going to be providing guideline for other processes, subsequent processes of time management, project management plan provides guideline how to create the schedule management plan. And then we need the project charter. Naturally, the project charter is the main document still, because we have not done much so far and we need to start from somewhere, and project charter is the basic document which we are following, and therefore we will refer to the project charter. Then we have enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets, which is normal. We have already seen that these things are input everywhere. What are the different tools and techniques? Naturally, you have to use the expert judgment. You have to consult the experts also. You have to take into confidence all the stakeholders and even your project team members. And with mutual decision making, you will reach to those procedures and policies which you want to include in the schedule management plan. This is also a use of analytical technique in here. Why? Although schedule management plan, it by itself is not supposed to be doing any analysis, but it is recommending the tools and techniques for all other processes, and if it does not know the how to analyze those things, it will not be able to cater for the requirements. Therefore, some analytical techniques must also be known to the project scheduling person, the person who is creating the schedule management plan, as if that knowledge could be used amicably to further address the remaining subsequent processes. Then you also conduct meetings to do all this, and ultimately you come up with a schedule management plan. Okay. And if you look at the schedule management plan from diagrammatical point of view, that would look like this. As you have already seen, we have described the way of representing a process in PMBOK, that the background box shows it is time management, and the dark gray box shows the process in question is the plan schedule management. What all is coming into it, from where this is specified here, the project charter is actually coming from developed project charter of initiation. Project management plan is coming from the developed project management plan of planning, and our organization is giving us the enterprise non-material factors and process assets. So these are the four inputs you have seen in the previous table. And naturally, tools are not mentioned here, but the outputs are mentioned, and we know there is only one output, and that is schedule management plan. But the schedule management plan is going to provide guidance for all the subsequent processes. Therefore, it needs to go to each and every one of the subsequent processes. Define activities also require the schedule management plan. Estimate resources, estimate sequencing, estimate the durations, and develop schedule. All of them will have as input the schedule management plan. And for outside knowledge areas, identify risk and perform qualitative risk analysis, quantitative risk analysis. These are the two processes which need to have the schedule management plan. Why? When risk is identifying some risks and they impact the schedule, risk must have the knowledge of how the schedule was created. Therefore, the schedule management plan is needed here. Similarly, once the risk analysis is being carried out quantitatively, at that stage also we must understand and need to know the schedule management plan, the procedures given in that, the allowable techniques given into that. They all have to be accounted for here in risk. So there are two processes of risk who are receiving the schedule management plan. Otherwise, the subsequent processes of time management are basic beneficiary of this schedule management plan. So these are the inputs. There should not be any doubt about these. These are the tools. Expert judgment we have already studied. Analytical techniques, if you like, I can read it for you. The plan schedule management process may involve choosing strategic options to estimate and schedule the project, such as scheduling methodology, scheduling tools and techniques, estimating approach, formats, project management software. All these things uh, we are advising our subsequent processes to use them. But the person who is advising them, if he doesn't know what they are and he doesn't know how to use them, then probably his advice is not good enough. Therefore, analytical techniques are required. The schedule management plan may also detail ways to fast track and crash the project schedule, such as undertaking work in parallel. These decisions, like other schedule decisions affecting the project, may affect the project risks also. Organizational policies and procedures may influence which scheduling techniques are employed in these decisions. Techniques may include but are not limited to the rolling wave planning we have already read. The leads and lags we are going to study in a little while. Alternative analysis and many other methods for reviewing the schedule performance. So that is why we need to have analytical techniques here. Then there are meetings. Participants at these meetings may include the project manager, sponsor, and selected team members and selected stakeholders also, anyone with responsibility for scheduling, planning, or execution, and others as needed. Schedule management plan, as we have already described, is a component of the project management plan. what should it include? Although we are not discussing exact format of the schedule management plan, but it should include how the schedule model will be developed. What is the level of accuracy expected? What are the units of measure? How are you measuring your schedule? Is it in days or weeks or minutes or whatever? Organizational procedure links. The WBS provides the framework for the schedule management plan, allowing for consistency with the estimates and resulting schedules. Then schedule model maintenance. How the schedule model will go through changes. How would it be maintained? Because whenever we leave it loose, it starts moving. It's many factors start impacting it. So as soon as it is baseline, we have frozen it, but before that, he said it has gone through many instances. And moreover, when in monitoring and control also, when there is a change request which is approved, then we have to unfreeze the schedule, and as soon as we unfreeze it, it will again start changing moment to moment. And again, we have to get satisfied that it is on a stable form, and then we will baseline it again. Control thresholds, the variance threshold for monitoring schedule performance may be specified to indicate an agreed upon amount of variation to be allowed before some action needs to be taken. Like I said, how much is your control threshold? How much can you bear? In a months-long project, is a delay of few minutes okay with you? Then it is within your control threshold. If it is not okay with you, then this is outside of your control threshold, and therefore we must take action immediately if even a project is delayed by minutes. Then rules of performance measurement have also to be described. How are you going to measure the performance of the schedule, how good or bad it is going? There could be many methods. One of the methods is the earned value management. We use earned value management in the modern project, and this is what the PMI recommends to us, but people still worldwide are not actually, all of them are not actually using the earned value method, and they are still using the old method of percentage uh, complete, and in which you just estimate how much work has been done, which is not a very good way, but still if you are using it, then that would be your performance measurement mechanism. But a more efficient, a more effective method is earned value management. So the schedule management plan must specify the rules for establishing how much work has been completed. Control accounts at which management of progress and schedule will be measured. When do you want the schedule to be measured? Earned value measurement techniques, if used, like baseline, fixed formula, percent complete, etc., all of these things will have to be employed, and more details about it is given in another standard, which is called practice standard for earned value management. It is good if you can study those standards also, but again I would say for PMP this is not mandatory, this is not required. So you can study from PMP, okay, and go for the exam, but if you want to really understand the concepts, you have time to read through those standards also, you must, because these standards are not really very lengthy. Some standard would be 70 pages or 80 pages. It is not as thick as not as thick as PMP, okay. Then your reporting formats are to be described here in the schedule management plan. The formats and frequency of various scheduled reports are defined. Any process descriptions of each of the schedule management processes are documented. So this was all about the schedule management plan and what should be included in it. Now we are going to talk about the defined activities, and in defined activities, as you already know, that we are trying to identify and document the specific actions or activities to be performed to produce the project deliverable. So we have to list down all activities, and when we are doing that, we are trying to be proactive, and we are not going to ignore any activities. Whatever can come to the mind, whatever we as a team can think should be the activity of the project must be identified and must be defined here. I know because the project is uncertain, there would be certain activities which will not come to the mind and they will be skipped, and we will address them later through progressive elaboration. As we move ahead with the time, rather I would say not progressive elaboration, there is a smaller version of progressive elaboration which is called rolling wave planning. Do you understand the difference between the progressive elaboration and rolling wave planning? Yes, please. Progressive elaboration was when we plan something in a uncertain environment at a strategic level, and we say, okay, we will broadly do this thing in this manner, but if there is a change recognized later, we will adjust our plan accordingly. So when we are defining the project and its phases, that was the point where the progressive elaboration was first initiated, and when we start doing the phases, then any change which realizes at a broader level would then be further enhanced and improved through the progressive elaboration. The progressive elaboration is as we move, so we plan at a higher level, at a strategic level, at project or phase level, but the same concept when applied to activity level or the work package level, at tactical level, then it is called rolling wave planning. The key benefit of this process is to break work packages into activities that provides a basis for estimating, schedule, executing, monitoring and controlling the project work. So this breakup of the work packages into activities is the main mission. This is what we need to do. So this process, what are the inputs? Naturally, now we don't need project management plan as such. We can use the schedule management plan. We also need the scope baseline, because scope baseline contains the WBS and the WBS dictionary, and we need WBS dictionary because it explains and details the work packages, and our responsibility is to break those work packages down into the activities. Then are the enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets. We have no problem with them because these are there always in the input. So let's move to the tools and techniques. We have used a tool by the name of decomposition earlier when we were creating the WBS. This was the tool there, decomposition. But that was used at that point in time just to decompose the project down to a work package level. The smallest level of the work breakdown structure was the work package. Although the work package could have been broken down further into the activities, but we did not do that there. Now is the time to do that. Now our mission is to break each work package into activities. And again we are going to use the same skill, same tool of decomposition. Then we have the rolling wave planning, as I just explained, as progressive elaboration is to the project and the phase at strategic level. So rolling wave planning is to the work packages and activities at tactical level. So if we are identifying an activity and we are identifying the activities, and some of the activities we do not capture, we do not understand, we do not know, so we do not capture certain activities, but as soon as they become visible, we must capture them and we must accommodate them into the defined activities. So this is called rolling wave planning. We use the expert judgment and we create ultimately the three outputs as I have been describing to you earlier: activity list, activity attributes, and the milestone list. I have just defined these three things to you earlier as well. Then we have, okay, define activities. If you look at it from the diagrammatical point of view, the inputs are coming. Create WBS is giving it the scope baseline. Project schedule management is plan schedule management is giving it the schedule management plan, and enterprise is giving the organizational processes and enterprise non-control factors. Here you see the output of defined activities were three: activity list, activity attribute, and milestone list. Activity list and attribute are required to be sent to all of the processes of time management within planning. It goes to sequencing, it goes to duration estimate, resource estimate, and it also goes to the developed schedule. But why is milestone only going to sequence activities and not going anywhere else? The basic reason is the milestone list is instrumental in developing the sequence, in determining the dependencies amongst the activities. Because when you have a milestone, you think according to that milestone. If we have to meet that milestone, which are the activities which must have been completed before that? And for doing that activity, what activities have to be done even before that? So that's how we determine the the sequence of the activities through the milestone list. Later on, when the sequence has been developed, the milestones are actually built into the sequence now and would form part of the schedule in developed schedule when we consolidate the whole picture. So milestones will automatically be included, and they do not have to be explicitly sent separately to each one of these processes. So milestone list is only to be delivered to sequence activities and nowhere else. Inputs, we have the very common known things. We have the schedule management plan, schedule baseline, enterprise non-control factors, and process assets. Not much to describe here. Tools and techniques, as I said, decomposition is the same technique which we use in Create WBS, and this is a technique used for dividing and subdividing the project scope and project deliverables into smaller, more manageable parts. Activities represent the effort needed to complete a work package. All the work included in a work package is all the activities. The define activities process defines the final output as activities rather than deliverables, as done in the Create WBS process. In Create WBS process, we might have done the whole thing, a whole breakup in from delivery point of view, deliverable point of view. Maybe the lowest portion, the work packages, are actually to deliver something. But here, once we are converting it into activities, then our activities must be some process or some work which will result in the delivery of something. The activity list WBS and WBS dictionary can be developed either sequentially or concurrently, with the WBS and WBS dictionary as the basis of the development for final activity list. For each work package within the WBS is decomposed into the activities required to produce the work package deliverables. I hope this I described earlier. Involving team members in the decomposition can lead to better and more accurate results. So this is not the job of the project manager alone to do, but he must get the team involved. Rolling wave planning. Again, as I described, this is an iterative planning technique in which the work to be accomplished in the near term is planned in detail. So you plan the initial things and you leave the future items to be planned subsequently, as it was in the case of progressive elaboration. Therefore, work can exist at various levels of detail depending on where it is in the project life cycle. In project life cycle, the beginning processes would be more detailed, more defined, whereas the subsequent processes will be further elaborated or defined as and when new facts surface. During early strategic planning, when information is less defined, work packages may be decomposed to the known level of detail. As more is known about the upcoming events in the near term, more work packages can be decomposed into activities. So there will be certain work packages which cannot be decomposed because we do not know much about them. And so we leave them as work packages, but where and when that information becomes available and we are now in a position to break open those work packages which were not broken earlier, then we have to convert them, decompose them into activities. Then we use expert judgment, and as a result we have the activity list. You can read it through. I have defined generally activities attributes. These are the distinct from milestones. They have durations, they have during which the work of that activity is performed, may have resources, costs, and all those things associated. These are all the activity attributes. Milestone list is a significant point or event in a project. A milestone list is a list identifying all the project milestones and indicates whether the milestone is mandatory, such as those required by contract, or optional. So your milestones can also be mandatory or optional. Milestones are similar to regular schedule activities with the same structure and attributes, but they have zero duration. So milestone is a point in time, so that cannot uh, cannot have any duration. So milestones will always be having zero duration, but they are shown in MS Project or Primavera just like activities with zero duration. Next is the sequence activities. Before we can start that, if you have any questions, please ask. None whatsoever? Okay. Fine.
Yeah, sir, it's fine for now.
Okay, good. So once we are sequencing the activities, this is the process of identifying, documenting the relationships among the project activities. Now this is very interesting and very important also. You must understand how can we identify the relationship between two activities and how can we document that and how can we apply that. Anyways, the key benefit of this process is that the logical sequence of work to obtain the greatest efficiency given all the project constraints. So remaining within the project constraints, how best can you perform? This is the best way, best sequence of work which can occur. So this is what we are trying to achieve, a best sequence of work, a logical sequence of work. So that for sequencing activities, we have the schedule management plan as an input. As you remember, in sequence, we had all the three inputs coming from the defined activity, the activity list, activity attribute, and milestone list. And remember, the milestone list is the only thing which is happening only here. This is coming here and this is not going anywhere else in the whole project management. Milestone list will be used by for sequencing activities, and later on these milestones will be built into the sequence, and ultimately they won't be required to be separately given to any other process. Project scope statement has to be considered because project scope statement defines the general approach and the selected method or to address that. So we also have the enterprise non factors and process assets. The tools we use here will have to be described in more detail. Precedence diagramming method, as I was just telling you, the old method of time management, which used to be arrow diagramming method, is now obsolete. Previously, till third edition of the PMBOK, we used to teach both of these. But now the arrow diagramming method ADM is no more valid and it is considered obsolete. Now we use only the precedence diagramming method, and this precedence diagramming method I'll describe later. Dependency determination, what is depending on whom and for what? We have to find the dependency determination amongst various processes, various activities. Leads and lags. Lead is the gap given between two activities for a specific purpose. And lag is the overlap given between two activities again for a specific purpose. So when do we give leads? जी मोशन कोई ज़हन में आता है कि लीड का इस्तेमाल कहाँ होगा? Yes, Mohsen?
Not really, sir.
Okay.
Not sure.
One of the activities is that you have to paint a wall. And the next activity is to install a AC on the wall. These are two activities which are dependent. So installation of AC is dependent on the completion of paint on the wall. Right? So now the paint has been done. Should you install the AC? Can you?
Yes, sir, maybe because that was the only dependency. If that was the only dependency.
Okay. But you know the paint is wet.
Yeah, yes. Obviously, we have to wait for that.
You have to wait. The wait time which has to be given between two activities is called lead. Now you understand.
Okay, so yes, got it.
And lag is otherwise. This is the overlap you give. You know, one activity is about to finish, and before it finishes, maybe 1 hour or 2 hours before or 1 day before, you start the next activity. That is called you are giving a. Sorry, I explained it everything wrong. The overlap is lead, and the gap is lag. I'm sorry for the mistake. Overlap is lead and the gap is lag. Is it fine now? Okay.
Sir, once one activity is waiting for the other, that means lag, right?
Yes, the wait time is lag. Wait time is lag. And overlap time
Okay.
is lead. Right? Okay. So
How would we define the lead, sir?
lead.
Example.
Like I said, there is A activity and there is a B activity. B activity has to start 1 day before the end of A activity. We could have said it will start after the A activity. That would be a state relationship. But we say it will start 1 day before the end of A activity. So we have given a lead of 1 day to B activity. It can now start 1 day earlier. This is called lead.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And ultimately the result we will have, the output will have the schedule network diagram, which we'll just learn how to make, and the project documents could be updated as a result of this. So this shows the diagrammatical layout, how and where the things are coming from. You know, the scope statement comes from the defined scope, and you know, organization gives us these two things. Schedule management plan gives us a schedule management plan, and define activities give us three things: activity list, attribute, and the milestone list. And what are we giving out? We are giving out the network diagram, and it is only required by the develop schedule. The last planning process, develop schedule requires it. It is not to be sent to any other process. It has absolutely nothing to do with when we are estimating the resources or durations, etc. This has no job there. But when all of this data from all of these various processes will get together in the develop schedule, then we will require them to join. Before that, they are not joined, they do not communicate. and if there is any update to the project documents, that will be updated in the project document archive. So these are the 7 processes, and although they are 7 and looks like a big list, but it is not that difficult a list. You need to have a schedule management plan in the beginning, and then the 3 things are coming from the scope, and project scope statement is also required, and these are last 2 things. You understand they are everywhere in the input. So these are the brief descriptions of each one of these. Okay, the main thing is these tools and techniques. Precedence diagramming method. What is this precedence diagramming method and all these things? Let us first describe the precedence diagramming method. This is a technique used for constructing a schedule model in which activities are represented by nodes and are graphically linked by one or more logical relationships to show the sequence in which the activities are to be performed. Activity on node is one method of representing a precedence diagram. Activity on node is another name for PDM because the activities in this method are nodal by nature. So let me show you how they look like. So if you can see this diagram, the boxes, in the whole network, the arrows are connected to the nodes, and nodes are the boxes. Here, these boxes are the activities. In precedence diagramming method, boxes represent the activities and arrows represent the relationship between the activities and the flow of the project, direction of flow of the project, right? Now you see that everything in this project starts from a single start point and finishes on a single end point. There is no possibility, no allowance for any activity not meeting the end. Any activity which is hanging out and not connected to end, that is not possible, that is not allowed, and such an activity must be a redundant activity. Similarly, if an activity does not start from the begin or the start point, then that activity is also either to be connected with the start or it has to be removed. So this is generally how a precedence diagram will look like. This is another representation in which you see when you start the project, you could start A and C, and B is dependent on A and C, and D is dependent on A and C. So practically speaking, none of the B or D could start before A and C both have finished. E is dependent on completion of B and D. If both have finished, only then E can start, and E is the last activity. When it will end, the project will finish. Then are the relationships. The most common relationship between any two activities could be a finish to start relationship. As you have seen in this diagram, in the previous diagram, you see every box of activity has a starting edge and a finishing edge. Generally, an activity is connected with the other activity by such a relationship in which the previous activity must finish as if the successor or the subsequent activity can start. So the connection is between the finish of A and the start of B. So finish to start is the relationship which is shown here. Between A and B, the relationship is finish to start. Between C and D, it is finish to start. Between A and D, it is finish to start. Between C and B, it is finish to start. So you see these relationships are finish to start because the arrow comes out of the finish point of the previous activity and enters into the start point of the subsequent activity. Generally speaking, people call the previous activity as the predecessor activity and the next activity, subsequent activity, as a successor activity. Now, people generally think from the finish to start point of view, and they assume that the activity which is happening first must be the predecessor activity and the subsequent activity must be the successor activity. But that is not exactly true. This might be true if the relationship is finish to start, but we have three other kinds of relationships also. And those relationships are start to start, finish to finish, and start to finish. Generally speaking, a finish to finish relationship is, first let me explain how will I define finish to start. First, let us establish that the previous activity is not always the predecessor and the subsequent activity is not always the successor. First, let us establish this. Second thing is, one activity has to be dependent on another activity. But both these activities cannot be interdependent. It is not possible that A is dependent on B and B is dependent on A. B could be dependent on A, but then A is not dependent on B because A is the main activity and B is the parasite. It only can happen, it only can start when the condition of finishing the previous activity has been completed. So the activity on which somebody depends is called a predecessor activity. An activity that is dependent on something or some other process is called a successor activity. So if I want to define finish to start relationship, I would say A activity, or for that matter predecessor activity, must have finished as if the successor activity can start. This is the definition of finish to start. Predecessor activity must have finished as if the successor can start. Now the important point here is the predecessor activity, with predecessor activity there is a condition, and that condition is attached to the finish of predecessor activity. So it is an imposing condition, and if this condition is not met, the successor activity is not allowed to start. So the specific instruction that the predecessor must have finished must be complied with, and if it has finished, only then the successor can start. So you see, FS means, F stands for the condition of imposed by the predecessor, and S stands for the flexibility of the successor activity. Flexibility means it was constrained that it could not start before the predecessor has finished. Now the constraint has been removed. Now it has flexibility. It could start immediately. It could start after 1 hour, 1 day, or 1 month. But it is not defying anything. The basic condition given to it is you cannot start before A activity finishes. It has complied with that and A activity has now finished. Now it is not compulsory for activity B to immediately start. It can start a little while later, depending upon the other constraints and other restrictions which may be imposed on the successor activity. So for the time being, we are saying that in this condition, successor activity can start any time after the predecessor activity has finished. This was an easier relation to understand. Let us see, first let us see the start to start relationship. I'll just change the order. If I translate start to start, the first start is the condition of the predecessor and the second start is the flexibility of the successor, right? So what we need to do here is we need to start the predecessor activity. So the condition is the start of predecessor activity. So predecessor must have started, the predecessor activity must have started as if the successor can also start. So the earliest these two activities could start is as soon as A has started, B could start. This is a start to start relationship. But this is the earliest. Latest, it could be any time later than that. Because no matter how late the second activity starts, that is not bound by A activity's condition. A activity's condition is over when it says if A activity has started, you can start. So you have given me a flexibility to start any time after. So I can start any time after. If I have no other restrictions, I can take it to any length. But earliest would be they could be started almost together. Now finish to finish, the relationship is now of finish of the predecessor and finish of the successor. Finish of the predecessor is the condition and the flexibility is finish of the successor. So if I translate it into the same definition, it could be the predecessor activity must have finished as if the successor activity can finish. That essentially means that probably the predecessor activity has already started and we don't know when it started. It has already started, but we are only binding it that it cannot finish until and unless the predecessor has finished. So no matter how much time the predecessor takes in finishing, no matter if the job of the successor is already complete, but it cannot be declared finished until and unless the predecessor has finished. So the logical relationship is like that, that A activity must finish as if the B can finish. Last relationship, start to finish, is the most difficult and most, impossible to conceive. You can't easily conceive how is it possible to have a start to finish relationship. Why? Because this is unconventional. It says the predecessor activity should have started as if the successor activity can finish. Meaning what? The successor activity has been happening already. We are only binding the finish of the successor activity with the start of the predecessor. Now here anybody would get confused because the predecessor is probably happening later than the successor. And the basic definition which we have implanted in our mind was the finish to start definition of previous and subsequent. So we can't really conceive how a predecessor can start later and a successor can already start. That's why this is the most difficult relationship to conceive. Okay, if you have listened to all this, can you come up with an example? As far as the finish to start is concerned, that is okay. We know if the things are to happen in sequence, then one thing must finish as if the next thing can start. So foundations must be laid as if the wall can be constructed, right? So what could be an example of a start to start? Yes, please. Start to start relationship.
Two walls, maybe just like two walls. If one wall starts, the other one has to start as well.
Okay.
I mean, it could be anything.
Why are they two related? They're two separate walls. What is the dependency?
Because once both of them complete, then maybe you can put the ceiling or something.
Okay, fine. I would accept that. This is a good example. All right. So you no, I have not already discussed with you the mandatory uh, man, uh, ma- uh, mandatory relationships, dependencies, and um, other dependencies. I'll talk about them, but this is a discretion you are using. There might not be a relationship between activity the two walls, but from your discretion, for the benefit of the project, you say that when the west wall is started, only then, the west wall has to start first. Once it has started, only after that you can start the other walls or the next wall. So that could have the kind of benefit you are telling me, that if the walls are constructed simultaneously or all together, then probably uh, that would be useful for getting the next job done easier. But I would argument that you could have made a condition that the construction of the construction of roof might be made dependent on both the walls. What do you say? Until and unless both the walls have completed, the roof will not be laid. Yes, please.
Yes, sir, that's totally true. But that would be finished to start.
That would be finished to start. Exactly. But anyways, I'll go by your example. That is good example. That is okay, because this is a discretionary dependency you have defined. But if I ask you for a mandatory dependency, this is not a mandatory dependency. Let me just tell you, there are four types of dependencies: mandatory dependencies, discretionary dependencies, internal dependencies, and external dependencies. Right? So internal dependencies are which we are creating from within our system. External are the environmental conditions and the orders coming from outside. And discretions are your discretion, as you said that I want this work to start before that work has started. So that is a discretionary dependency. But if you said the wall cannot be constructed unless the foundation is complete, so this finish to start relationship is a mandatory relationship. But when we have created a plan, and when we try to implement or execute that plan, usually there is a pressure to compress the schedule. And once we try to compress the schedule and we are not finding any way out, and we don't find from where we can compress the schedule, usually what we do is we make shortcuts. We try to create some other means by which the job can be somehow done earlier. We may like to increase the parallelism. So we try to change the relationship between two activities. If it was a finish to start relationship, I say, okay, let's not do it finish to start, let's do it start to start. though it may look impossible, and definitely it is impossible in some cases, but that forces us to think creatively and brainstorm and come up with an innovative solution. So what if I tell you that the dependency between the foundation and the construction of wall is start to start? The foundation, the work on foundation should have started as if the work on wall can start. Is it workable? Gee, is it doable?
No, sir, from this example, it should finish first. The foundation should finish and then the wall can start.
Right,
In
right.
this example.
But
Otherwise, I mean, it's understandable. Two
I,
things can start.
okay, I agree with you. But what I'm asking you to do is, you are in a fix. Your boss tells you to compress the schedule. You have tried everything. You have no way of compressing the schedule. This is the only relationship which, if changed, can save the day. I understand from your point of view this is impossible. Think creatively and tell me a solution. Maybe it may cost me more, but tell me a solution by which I can change the finish to start relationship to the start to start relationship. Okay, what I
Well, there is only, I don't know how we can do it. Yeah.
okay, fine. What I do is I leave it to you. You brainstorm yourself and try to use the same relationship. The predecessor is the construction of foundations. Successor is the construction of the wall. We understand it is a finish to start relationship. Try to come up with an example. Think creatively, break everything, bring some, out of the world solution. But I would like to listen to you tomorrow telling me that how is it possible that we can have a start to start relationship between the two, a finish to finish relationship between the two, and a start to finish relationship between the two. If you can do that, then you can do anything. So probably we should close today's lecture here, and I'll leave you with this food for thought. And although I do understand this is an impossible task, but we will make the impossible possible, and you will come up with some solutions, and then I'll guide you through. Will you be able to do it?
So I'll try my best.
Okay. And Asad, you must also try and see what happens. But tomorrow is your time. Okay. So if there is nothing else to say, we can conclude today's session. We have almost covered half of the time management, and I hope and wish that we can complete it tomorrow, because cost is also going to take some time. So if we want to complete this course before the Ramzan, either we have to add few classes, or we have to probably do something else, maybe increase the time of class by 1 hour or something, and somehow we have to complete it. Or there could be one other solution, and that is I would be taking another class. I'm starting another PMP course from 29th of May. So what we can do is I can ask you to join that when this subject comes up. The choice is yours. Wherever we will try to complete it, and if something is left, we can cover it in Ramzan with the other class, or I can take you on after the Eid. So think over this problem also, and probably we will find a solution to that. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. It was really nice having you today, and we'll miss you again. Thank you very much. Take care.